Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey, everybody. I am delighted to introduce my guest today, Shari Leid. Shari is a former litigator. She currently operates an Imperfectly Perfect Life, LLC, a professional mindset coaching business, serving clients who are in those tricky middle-age years, helping them create the life of their dreams. She is the author of the Friendship Flow Transformational book series, which includes the 50/50 Friendship Flow Life Lessons from and for my girlfriends, and Make Your Mess Your Message, More Life Lessons from and for my girlfriends. Please join me in welcoming Shari Leid. Welcome, Shari.
Hi, Tammy. I'm so happy to start my day with you.
Well, thank you. Yes. And here on the East Coast, we're partway through our day, but yes, it's lovely. In some ways, I feel like I'm still starting my day, being that I'm not much of a morning person. But anyway, welcome. And I have been just enjoying your book, your most recent book, Make Your Message, More Life Lessons from and for my girlfriends. But let's start at some of your earlier years. If we were to know you as a younger person, would we know something about you then that would tell us something about who you are today?
Well, I think as you know, our entire, our life history leads us to where we are today. And in my book, I share a little bit about my mess that became my message. And I note that my life started out pretty messy when I think back to it. I was born in Seoul, South Korea, and abandoned as a baby, and adopted by an American couple. And one thing that my friends find interesting about me is I don't know my actual birth date. And that really bugs them sometimes, especially my friends who love to look at their horoscopes and things like that. But because I was abandoned with no identifying information, no birth name, no birthplace, no birth date. So my life started out a little messy. But because of that mess, I was adopted into a wonderful family and have been given so many opportunities that I'm guessing I would not have had had my life not started the way it had.
Right. So this is not really what we're here to talk about, but I am curious. So you must have been found when you were abandoned and were in an orphanage?
Yes. So I was, if you believe the records, and it's hard to know, what records are actually true. There's no, you can't collaborate what was written, and all the other records have been destroyed since then because when I was found, it was the late 60s. But yes, so I was found in a parking lot, according to the records, in a cardboard box, then taken to a hospital, which was used as a baby home at that time. This was not uncommon for children and infants to be left. This actually started right after the Korean War, and there were a lot of Amerasian and Eurasian babies that were left, and Korea was actually the first country that began with the Hague Convention international adoptions. So this hospital was a baby home, and then from there I went to an orphanage, and it looks like I may have been in about 4 different places before being adopted.
Oh wow! And were they able to at least guesstimate what your birth date was, or approximate that, or have you sort of made up your own birth date, or?
Well, they were able to guess because I was still a baby, so developmentally they could guess. I mean, it wouldn't be years off. It could be a couple of months off, perhaps.
Yeah.
But they put me right in the middle of December, and I like, if you could choose a birthday, why put me where I'm competing with all these amazing holidays?
Yeah.
But I'm right smack in the middle of December, 9 days away from Christmas.
Well, I guess in the U.S., the only reason why that might be an advantage, at least for your parents, would be that they get the tax deduction in that tax year, right?
Right.
All right. Well, so clearly, as you said, the beginning was a mess, and yet you were adopted by a family in the U.S. So tell us where things went from there for you.
Sure. Well, I still live in the Seoul area, but I was raised in the Seattle area. Actually raised in Seattle proper. Now I live about 30 minutes east of Seattle. And, I was raised as an only child, and I went on. I was a checklist person, and I still somewhat am. So I do things in quote unquote order. So I went to, high school to college, to law school, to getting married, to having 2 kids, having 2 dogs. I kind of was doing things in order. But it was, somewhat of a typical life. I had a few, like everyone, bumps and scrapes along the way.
But it was, what you're saying is like once you were adopted and came to the U.S., it sounds like you're painting a picture that was, how do I say this? I hate the word normal, because normal just doesn't really mean anything. At least it doesn't to me. Would you say that you had kind of a linear, fairly stable path? Would that fit? Or
for the most part, it's all comparative. And
sure.
As talking to so many different people, we all have interesting stories that we can grab from.
Yeah.
It just so happens that my parents who adopted me, they were born in the U.S., but they were of Japanese American descent. And a generation at the time, they were older parents to adopt. Now,
they were. Okay.
Now it's not unusual. So they were the age of my friends' grandparents.
I see. So that was a little different for you then.
It was. And also they had been interned during World War II, when they interned the Japanese Americans on the West Coast, because my parents were born, my dad in Seattle, my mom on Bainbridge Island, which is in Washington State.
Yeah.
So they experienced internship for a couple of years during World War II because of their, they're born here, but because they were ethnically, their parents came from Japan, that was the cause for their internship. So I would say, if anything was not quote unquote normal growing up, we all have identity issues, and there are certain identity issues that come, I believe, from being adopted, and perhaps even more when you're internationally adopted.
Absolutely.
And then there's identity issues from not knowing your birth date. And then there's identity issues because you take on what your parents haven't resolved. And my parents growing up and being interned because of the way they looked in World War II, especially my father, who was a little older at the time he was interned, that really stuck with him. And I believe it changed the way he parented me. And as an Asian American woman, growing up, as far as my own self-confidence and being comfortable in my skin. So if there was anything not quote unquote normal, maybe that piece of identity was, had additional layers of struggle on it because of the past experiences of my adopted parents and myself.
Sure. And also when you think about growing up, even just looking in isolation, growing up female in the US, having been of a generation, being born around in the late 60s, as you said, there were different norms at that time for females in general. And then on top of it, you had all these other, identity kinds of issues, let's say. and then the influences that your parents had been through and whatever messages were sent as a result of that. So it sounds like by nature, you had this sort of innate sense of order about doing things in a certain way. That was sort of part of your DNA, so to speak, that, we all have certain parts of us, right? That we don't know where they come from sometimes. We just have a certain way of doing things, right? So you had this sort of sense of order or organization about how you went about moving through your schooling, your career, and you followed that path. I don't know if your parents had some influence on that as well, or how that went for you, but it sounds like there were some things that went, very directionally, and then there were other messages that came in that probably influenced how you felt about yourself.
Yeah, and you work with people with career changes and as a career coach, and so it is. You think of women in general, especially in our age group, who did this high school, college, law school. I was a litigator. That was my law practice as a litigator. So you also move into, especially at that time, an primarily all male field. If not, they assume that I walk into the courtroom and they'll assume that I'm the court reporter or the interpreter and not the attorney representing my client. Yeah. And you put all these layers, and I love the title of your book, Work from the Inside Out, because truly, I remember as we talk about identity and what had shaped me, being shaped by those experiences, and then thinking, okay, I finally made it. I went to law school. I'm a litigator. But still, I remember allowing what I saw other people see me as affect who I believed I was as a young attorney, and that start to chip away at who my self-confidence and my identity. So I love that title. When I saw it, Work from the Inside Out, I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I had to do.
Yeah. Wow. So, well, let's go back just a step. So you went to college, and then when did you decide that you wanted to go to law school? What sparked that interest?
So initially, so my bachelor's of arts is in psychology, which is kind of, I kind of made a full circle because now I'm a coach, and that's more in the psychology realm than the litigation realm. But as I was going through, I knew I wanted to do something past my bachelor's degree, whether that was a PhD or professional school. And as I was taking these psychology courses, I realized, my interest actually at that time was not going to be to pursue a PhD in this field, because it wasn't exactly what I thought it was as I was taking the courses. And it led me to explore. And one thing that has always stood out to me, and I don't know if this is part of my history with my parents, was this really strong sense of justice and wanting to help the underdog. And especially as a young person in her early 20s, that was the motivation for me to choose law school over something like, let's say, a business MBA or something like that, was the idea that I could be the voice for someone that doesn't have a voice.
And so would you say that inkling towards a sense of justice was based on what you knew your parents had gone through, or was it based on your own experience?
I think a lot of times we have it wired in us. There's just some of us that like we physically feel ill when we see somebody being treated unfairly. And I think that's something wired into us, and we're born with that. And that's neither good or bad. It's just a part of us. But that coupled with recognizing, my parents, born as American citizens, went, and most of the Japanese Americans went willingly without argument. There were some that stood up for their civil rights. Most did not, because they thought that that's that's how we show that we are good Americans,
I
by
see.
following the rules. This is what we want to do as a community, to show that we are these people that obey and we aren't troublemakers.
Wow.
And that was the collective response. So there was very little fight to go in or protest or anything like that, what we may see today. And that always bothered me. And I was definitely, I always say I'm an extrovert that was raised to be an introvert. I don't know if my parents were introverts because of their circumstances, but I always wanted to fight back where they were always trying to quiet my voice. And so that spark was there too.
That's very interesting. Did they, this is interesting. Did they share with you when you were a child? Did they share with you what their experience was like being interned?
Yes, especially. So my mom was a little younger. She had a very different experience because she was younger. She remembers playing with her friends and all of a sudden being with her friends all the time because they were put in barracks and the families were all close together. So for her as a younger child, that also she had this freedom to see her friends more often. And it's interesting. She had 8 older brothers, and 7 of them ended up serving in the war because they were able to leave the camps early if they served in the war. And so her mom at one time was given 6 of her brothers served. She was given 6 yellow stars to represent all her boys that were serving for the U.S. And so there was this picture of a barrack where she's being interned and 6 yellow stars to represent the boys that were serving on behalf of the U.S., in the U.S. military. So she has a really cool story. My father, he was drafted, but he had flat feet and bad eyes, so he didn't get any. He says that probably saved his life because he was rejected. But he was older, and it really profoundly affected him. He would say it's the only time he would ever become emotional, and the emotions would surprise him. So for him, it was difficult, and his parents, because they were in these barracks, all of a sudden they had no privacy. They had to eat at mess halls. He remembers the guns being pointed at him, even though the story was that they were trying to protect them. One of his jobs was to dig ditches for graves when people died in the internment camps. He had to clean the community bathrooms. They're just one long stall with no privacy. He remembers that. But another thing he remembers, though, that he ended up with his second career they absolutely loved, is he worked as a teacher of younger students in the classroom when he was interned. And he ended up becoming an engineer later, but he always remembered that his love was teaching, especially teaching kids that had difficulty. And he remembers being good at that. And so his second career was as a teacher for deaf students in a college program at Seoul Central Community College. Wow. He taught math to deaf students. And he learned sign language after he got the job. He ended up writing a math book for deaf students that used the language that they were able to understand for higher level math. Wow. So this mess, again, being interned in this terrible life experience, really ended up being his message in a way that it gave him a career of his dreams. When he died at his funeral, half of the church was filled with his deaf students, and many of them flew from other countries because this was an international program. And so half the church, we had an interpreter there. They were signing hymns, and his mess became his legacy, I would say, because of his experience in camp. He would have never known how it felt to teach people.
What an example. I mean, it sounds like you got quite a wide range of messages from your parents about so many things in life.
And that's one thing I learned too, talking to people about what's your message. Our messes, a lot of times, if we take a step back, boy, they lead us to something pretty amazing.
Yeah. And if you take the time to look there, right? Mm-hmm. You can really uncover a lot of things that really take you somewhere in your life. So you became a litigator, and where did that take you, Shari?
Well, I was a criminal prosecutor for 7 years, and then I worked for a large insurance company as a defense attorney for their insureds for another 7 years in a number of different types of civil litigation um, cases. And I'm still licensed. I've kept my license,
Mm-hmm.
uh, but I don't necessarily plan to go back to law, though recently I've been looking into using it in a way to volunteer or be more active in the legal community.
Wow. So it's wonderful to have that, have that as part of your toolkit, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So when you pursued litigation and were working those years, did you feel like you were fulfilling your initial goals with it, or how did that play out for you?
There was a time where I would play Gloria Gaynor's song "I Will Survive" as my theme song on the way to work every morning.
Yeah.
So if that gives you an idea of how I was living my life as a litigator, I loved the title, and I loved to be able to say this is who I was. Like I said, I did things in order. So that was my identity. That became my identity.
Yeah.
But it certainly did not feel like I was living my purpose, or, it didn't feel it was stressful. It did not feel like me.
Yeah. And how did you know that? When did you figure that out?
Well, it just, again, here it goes back to the messes. So I said, we have two children. Well, our oldest we adopted from China. And we found out I was pregnant two weeks after we came home from China. So we had a baby the same year. I had to cut my maternity leave in half since I needed to take 2 leaves in 1 year. But while that was also a mess in of itself, we would not have realized her developmental delays as early as we did, but for having the baby at about the same time. And because of these developmental delays, it became apparent that one of us, my husband's also an attorney, one of us needed to stay at home because she was, and this is before we had this ability to be as online as we are now. Maybe we could have done something now, but at that time, one of us really needed to be present because we had so many therapy appointments. Neither of us were getting a whole work week in. And so we felt like we were both failing at work and at home.
Right.
And so I felt I needed to be there with her. Mm-hmm. It was very unplanned. My break from practicing law actively feels, when I think back, very immediate. Yeah. And so it was a shock to me to all of a sudden stay home, and I wasn't prepared. And but that's what pulled me out of active litigation.
So once so even though your break from active litigation felt somewhat unplanned and sudden, you had the opportunity then, if that's the right word, to get a perspective on that as well, I would imagine.
I did. It took a while. It took a long while because I had to find my identity. And I used to then all of a sudden go out and meet new people, and they'd say, "What do you do?" And I would joke and say nothing. And then I realized, I got to stop that bad self-talk because one, I'm doing the hardest job I've ever done, staying at home with 2 little kids, you know? But it was really hard for me to find my identity and then find, what am I passionate about? What do I want to do?
Yeah. So how did that evolve for you?
So it was, so I stayed home with them for quite some time. And during that time, I did little things. I got very into fitness. I became a fitness instructor for a while they were in school, and started my own studio. Ended up having, and it's not related to my fitness, but 2 hip replacements. So that stopped. And this was in my 30s.
Wow.
But then as my kids became more independent, and I was, in my 40s at that point, I went through a breast cancer diagnosis.
Oh my goodness.
And the breast cancer journey. And that really fast forwarded this thinking of what am I here to do?
Yes.
And when I got Yeah, when I got that diagnosis, after having my hips replaced in my 30s, breast cancer, I thought, okay, these experiences are happening to me for a reason. What am I supposed to do with this? And that was the catalyst that led me to look into coaching and where I am now as a coach and a writer.
Yeah. So talk about life showing up with messes.
Yeah. I now tell the universe, okay, can you please give me the next message in like a podcast form?
Yeah, really.
I don't need to experience it personally, at least for this next decade.
Yeah. Could the next decade not have a health issue with it?
Right. Yes.
I mean, because it sounds like you really took some very, you had to pivot very quickly when you realized that your child, had some developmental issues, and you stepped right up and addressed that. And then you got into fitness, opened up a studio. Some people just get into fitness. They don't just then turn it into a business. So clearly you're not somebody who just does things small. That's my sense of you. But then you didn't just get one hip replaced, you got both hips replaced. And I don't say that, as if it's, it's like, okay, so maybe you could do something a little smaller somewhere along the way.
Yeah, I would be fine with doing something small for that next message, definitely.
Right. I'm teasing you a little bit on that, but those are a lot of trials. You've been put through a lot, almost from day one. You've been put through a lot of trials, and here you are giving back so much. That's what's really remarkable here. So you've kept up your law license. You're a coach now. You've written these amazing books. When did you decide to write books, and when did you have time to write books? How did those fit into the picture?
Yeah, well, I always wanted to write a book, like many people. I've got this book in me, and I do believe everyone has a book in them. And finally, I decided, okay, I've just got to do it. And I was starting to write a different book. And between my 49th and 50th birthday, I decided to have 50 dates with 50 of my girlfriends for the purpose of letting them know what I've learned from them, with the idea everyone we meet is both our teacher and our student. And so because I'm an oversharer, I decided I was sharing these dates on Facebook. And these were in-person dates right before, not right before, but before the pandemic.
Yeah.
And people start to ask me, how did you get this idea? How did you do this? I want to do something similar, but goodness, not with 50. And so I started to challenge people to do this and make a commitment to meet with at least 5 people in your life to tell them what you've learned from them.
Yeah.
3 people, whatever it is, but have this experience of sitting down one-on-one, because this came to me when I was at a girlfriend's memorial service, and I saw people stand up and say how wonderful she was and tell these stories. And I thought this was great, but they never sat down and said these things to her. And so that's what started this between my 49th and 50th birthday personal challenge. That became my first book. And then after I wrote the first book, the pandemic happened. I was sitting at home, and I took a Robin Roberts masterclass. And in that, she said her mom taught her to make her messages. And that's what sparked the idea that, okay, I'm home. Now I could meet with another 50 women or so, this time over Zoom, and ask them that question. And that was really eye-opening, because even with women that I've known for a long time, I never knew what their mess was.
Really?
Yeah. And it made me realize, one, we don't like to talk about our messes, because we don't want to burden our friends with these things necessarily. 2, it made me realize I need to ask the question. I need to find out a little bit more and about my friend.
Yes. Interesting. So that was the first, when you turned 50, that was the 50-50 friendship flow life lessons from and for my girlfriends.
Yes, correct.
And then you decided, wait a minute, there's more. Is that right? And that's where the second, well, that's your third book, actually, right?
That's the second book.
Okay.
Second book.
That's your second book. Okay. For some reason, I was thinking there were 3 books. Why did I think
the third one's coming out this year?
That's why I'm thinking there are 3 books. Okay. So there's a third book coming. Great. Well, we need more. And I think, what's really interesting about this is, or what I love about your books is that each story, each person, there's something relatable about each one of them. And you can open up your books and just pick a story. Just pick one story and just take it in. You don't have to read it from the beginning to the end. You can take it in however you want and get something out of it and find yourself probably a little bit in each story, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, definitely. And my hope too is that, it reminds you of your girlfriend, or it reminds you of your friend that you met. And it just reminds us how connected we all are. All the women between the 2 books, they're in 3 years, I interviewed 144 women who are in my life, in my life at some level, either, really close friends or more recent acquaintances. And of the 144 women I interviewed or sat down with, we're all different ages, we're different races, different economic levels, different educational levels, different political views. And you realize we're all connected. We all have the same human experience. And it just helps me to be able to look at somebody who it's been really helpful, especially during the difficulty of the last 2 years, for me to look at somebody who has a differing opinion of mine and take a step back. And doesn't mean I have to agree with them, but it allows me to look at them with a sense of grace and understand that that opinion comes from their experience. And it just gives me a place of grace and connection, even with somebody that I may 100% disagree with.
I love that. And I love that there is that kind of diversity. It's not just a diversity of backgrounds on every level, that there might be somebody who you don't agree with entirely, and yet you can offer those perspectives and learn something from it. That there's nothing, in my mind, there's no greater gift than to just have that point of understanding where someone else is coming from, regardless of whether you think you agree or disagree. Because oftentimes I think we jump to conclusions too quickly. I would imagine too that your background as a litigator, as a lawyer, is helpful with this in some ways, because when you think about putting a case together or putting evidence together, there's so much that you have to look at, either objectively or just look at. You have to put the facts together, the evidence together without judgment, and just see things for what they are. Or at least, we all have judgment to some degree, but I could see where your background could really be helpful with that, I'll say.
Yeah. And it's interesting, as coaches, right, we help guide our clients, and we ask the questions so that they could find the answers that they have inside them and explore. Right. The big difference I know I learned when I was trained to be a coach is, as a litigator, you ask a lot of questions, but you're trying to lead somebody to the place where you want them to be. Right. And as coaches, you do that. You don't have a destination for them other than hoping that they get to their best self, and they're leading the way, and you're not leading them. You're asking the questions so they can find that pathway. That was the switch. That was the big switch.
And how was that switch for you? Was that an adjustment, or was that something you were craving?
I would say craving, and it was nice to take that break, so it wasn't like one right after the other. But boy, it's like a breath of fresh air when you realize, okay, I don't have to have an agenda here. And I could just ask questions and help somebody explore and find their answers through this. And there's something very beautiful about the process, as I'm sure, you've experienced with your clients and seeing that aha moment where you're hearing them come up with their own answers and their own further questions. It's a lot more fulfilling and it feels a lot better and purposeful versus the feeling you get maybe as a litigator when you're like, yes, I won, I got them there, I get a point on the board. It's an entirely different energy and feeling.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's although I would imagine when you win a case, especially if you feel that justice was done in some way, that feels good.
Oh yeah.
And that there's something good about winning. And yet there is that place where when you know that somebody has, in a coaching situation, when somebody has arrived at that point of clarity within themselves and that they are feeling better about where they sit, there's that, for lack of a better word, there's that sort of genuine, that authenticity. Whereas with a case, your goal is to win. Authenticity doesn't always play a role in that, right?
Yeah, there's with coaching, there's a collaborative win. With litigation, it's an adversarial win. Ooh. You won because somebody lost. With coaching, your client won, and that was your goal too.
Yeah. What a nice distinction. Well, a nice distinction, not a pretty one, but I understand what you're saying. So, and yet I know that some coaches really struggle with the desire to try to fix things for people. And I could imagine that with your training as an attorney, that there is this desire to want to solve problems, to fix things for people, to have that knowledge of the law and what the law can do to at least arrive at some kind of conclusion, because the law has a place in doing that. Whereas coaching is, let's say, a lot messier, right? It doesn't have those definitive answers. And I know law is not a science either. There's always a lot of art there as well. But I'm curious about your experience between both professions, if you've noticed where those distinctions lie in terms of that kind of wanting to be able to serve, because they're both service professions. And yet we do have this desire to want to fix things for people.
We do. And I hadn't thought about this until you asked me this question. And when I think about law and I think about wanting to get to a final place, and where that is because you are literally being judged.
Yeah.
And you could see it. And so, when you have versus coaching, you may not see it.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I feel very confident as a coach that wherever it leads, no matter what it looks like, I know that whatever session we had is going to continue to percolate throughout the week, and it's going to spark something in that person that I coached with. I strongly believe that our clients come to us when they are supposed to, and these conversations happen because they're supposed to. So it's interesting, even though you don't see as concrete of a win-loss, I really, in the coaching realm, I feel it more. I feel more like every conversation, even if we don't get to that end point where we go, oh, we have an action plan, this week or whatnot. I feel the conversation and the thoughts that were placed and what it has sparked is going to continue throughout the next week. So I'm confident that every conversation is a win in coaching.
Interesting. So for yourself, for your own sense of yourself as a professional, What's the difference for you in terms of how you feel within your own identity or your own sense of confidence or well-being? I don't want to put too many words to this, but I get a very different feeling when you talk about that, what you just talked about in terms of being a coach and knowing that when somebody has arrived at a certain point, even if it's not a concrete endpoint versus like in a court case or a legal case, and it's reached an endpoint, it's not, I got the feeling there's a real difference for you with those.
There is. I wait, there's such a difference between now, what I'm doing now and what I was doing before. And, we're talking careers. I remember when I was mentoring high school girls years ago, and we visited a college counselor, and she told the girls, do what you love because you'll make money doing what you love versus doing what you think will make money, because then you'll feel stuck and you won't be happy, but you'd be stuck in that income. And that was advice never given to me. And that sat with me. And now as a coach, I feel that when I wake up in the morning, I'm excited for my day. When I'm at the end of the day, even if I'm exhausted, I feel like, okay, I did something that if I knew, one of my favorite quotes is, it comes in the form of a question. If you knew today was the last day of your life, would you be doing what you're doing now? And I think about that quite a bit. And with this job of coaching, yes, I would. Yes, I would have that conversation with the client even if I knew that today was the last day of my life. And that tells me that I am doing something that feels authentic to me. And I absolutely, I forgot the question, but I feel more confident in what I feel more confident in what I'm doing because it feels authentic to me. I don't feel like I don't feel like I'm fitting into somebody else's mode and trying to be something. I feel like I'm in alignment with who I am inside.
Yes. And I think, what just came to mind as you were talking about that is I think sometimes, we have to try different things in order to arrive at that point. It's not like when we're 18 or we're 20, we know who we want to be from that point onward. It's not like there's, even though you were the checklist person, right? And you had the straight line, you went from college to, law school, and you did all these things. It's not that those things were that you were on the wrong path then. You had to go on that path to get where you are now.
Right, exactly. And, and it ebbs and flows. Who knows what I'll be doing 5 years from now? And like I mentioned earlier, I actually am starting, it's because I talked to a woman who's in her 50s. At age 50, she went to law school. And it was a dream of hers all the time. And she was talking to me, and I realized what a privilege it was for me to get this degree, to become a lawyer. And I realized, I could be using that privilege right now. I don't need to work full time as an attorney, but there's something I could do with it. And so it's interesting how things ebb and flow, and they mean different things to you at different times of your life.
Yes.
And so if we can look at our lives without this judgment, thinking we need to do this, we have to do this. If I stop practicing law, then I failed, or whatever judgment we put on ourselves, if we can take that away, it really gives us so many more options to do different, fun, creative things that align with who we are at this time or that time in our lives.
Right. And I think we do. We start out thinking, well, this is what it's going to look like. And then I'm going to do this. And then I'm going to do that. And then I'll incorporate this other aspect of life and that. And, we think we have to model it somewhere, either aligned with what our parents did or in the opposite way of whatever our parents did or didn't do. I see a lot of that. And yet I like what you're saying to kind of let go of those conclusions or assumptions about what it's supposed to look like and stay open to what it could be, even your experience of being an attorney and saying, you know what? I don't want the same experience of being an attorney as I was, as a litigator, as I was. And yet I can see those skills and that knowledge still being useful today in very different ways. So I'm not going to throw it all away just because my experience with it before didn't fulfill me in certain ways. And I love that. I think that's an important lesson. And yet you keep up your license and you use it, great. And if you don't use it, at least you know you have a tool in your toolkit.
Yes, exactly.
So, Shari, tell us about your coaching practice and who are your who I don't want to say your dream clients, but I mean who are the people that you generally work with?
So I coach women who are in their middle-aged years of life. And middle age is, defined by 40s, 50s, and 60s. Most of my clients, however, are in their 50s. And they come to me. A lot of times they'll come to me, even though I'm not a career coach, they'll come to me because they feel like they need to do something different career-wise. And it's the sense, the word I hear a lot is purpose, finding purpose. And so that's how they usually come to me. A lot of times we dive into things that end up with career, but a lot of relationship issues and everything else that comes. Midlife is especially the 50s, I think, is such a time in our life when, we're discovering ourselves, and if you've raised kids, they may be leaving home. Parents are getting older. Relationships have changed, especially in the last 2 years with the pandemic. More divorces are happening. Friendships are changing.
Yes.
And so those are the people that I work with, women who are in those fabulous, tricky middle-aged years of life.
Yes, that's true. All of that is true. And I love your website, your URL, and imperfectlyperfectlife.com.
A mouthful. I didn't consult a brander when I named it. But yes, and imperfectlyperfectlife.com.
I think it's great. And so that's a great place for people to find you. You're also on Twitter and LinkedIn, and you have a Facebook page as well. There's lots of ways for people to find you. And your books, they really cover a wide range of people's stories and experiences, really runs a full gamut. Have you heard back from, I know some of these people are closer friends, some are more, I'd say, acquaintances, right? Have you heard back from some of the people who are in your books since they were in your books? How has that experience been for them to be profiled in your books?
Yeah, well, I'm very thankful that, especially the women in the first book, they didn't know that was going to become a book. So I had to ask them later for permission. Second book, they knew going in, and I gave them a heads up. Yeah. So I'm very thankful that they allowed me to share their stories, and many of them, their photos are in the books. I mean, it's very vulnerable to share a piece of yourself like that. Yes. So I'm very thankful. And yes, I'm in contact with most all of them, most all of the 144 women that are in the 3 books. And when I say acquaintance, I consider them friends. They're not just people I've met in passing.
I understand.
But I do also say my friendship bar is pretty low, so it doesn't take much for me to call somebody a friend. But yes, I've been in contact with these women, and it was interesting in this last book, Make Your Mess Your Message. And I told them ahead of time, that's the question I'm going to ask. So they were prepared, because it's a very vulnerable question to share your mess, especially a mess you haven't shared publicly with people before. And many of them said, wow, that's the first time I took time to think about where that mess led me. Because when we are in that mess, we're trying to survive. We're just trying to get out. So we don't necessarily take the time, because we don't have the luxury to look back at that mess and see, wow, that mess actually got me here. Yeah. So it was like therapy in a way. And it was a piece of gratitude that, and in learning that, they were able to just reflect back and go, wow, this is actually pretty amazing. And so we had a lot of those conversations too.
I would bet you've gotten a lot of amazing feedback from people on that. And what would you say? I mean, you've described now in this conversation a lot of your messes. You've shared a lot about your life. Is there a key message that you would like to share with our audience out of your messes? I mean, and when I hear the word mess, it sounds simple in a way. I think of mess. It could be all kinds of things, but you've been through a lot of messes. And I think of messes as, sort of transformational experiences, right? What would you say your message is from some of your messes?
I would say that I've learned that a mess, like an obstacle, is put there to lead you to something different. And when we could look at our messes in that way, it takes the sting off our messes a little bit, and allows us to take a breath and a step back to say, okay, this is a mess. What is the message from it? Where is this trying to lead me? And also I learned from this is that life is messy. I mean, after talking to all these people, life is messy, and we just need to know that messes are going to appear, and we can't overthink and try to plan. Like, I was a checklist person. You can't sit there and be stuck in fear, worrying about the next mess.
Right.
Just know from your past messes that you do have the tools it takes to conquer whatever mess is presented. Know that they'll come, and be confident because of your past experience that you have the tools to conquer any mess that comes, as opposed to worrying about which mess and what tools you'll need for the next mess that isn't even there and may never appear.
So in thinking about making career transitions in particular, what would be a key piece of advice that you might give somebody who's starting to think about what's next for them?
Well, I spoke to some women who made these career transitions, huge career transitions, and this is a big topic, and I'm sure your phone's ringing off the line now. So many people, the Great Resignation, are leaving their jobs and trying something new. And one thing that everyone told me who has done this is network, start to network, and you'll be surprised at how many people want to help you. And people are there and they want to connect with you. And they even people that you think are unreachable, that are, established in their careers.
Yeah.
Making that phone call, sending that email, what's the worst that could happen? They say no. Well, you didn't lose anything.
Right.
And that's another model that goes through my head too. What's the worst that can happen? And usually the worst that can happen is, okay, well, that's not bad, Yeah,
the worst that can happen is they don't answer you. They just don't get back to you. And even then, I find that a lot of people, they'll try to email somebody or reach out, and the person won't get back to them, and they'll say, well, they didn't get back to me. Well, how many times did you try to reach out to them? Once. Well, you got to do a little bit more than that because people's inboxes get full and people are busy and preoccupied, and you just got to give it a few more tries and see what you can do, or change up your subject line, and you'll get their attention. It's not unusual to have to try more than once to reach out to someone, and don't think of it as begging. Think of it as this is just what I need to do to try to reach out to someone. Some people are easier to reach than others, but I love that advice. It's one of my key pieces of advice as well. So, Shari, is there anything else we need to tell our audience about how to find you and your books and to know what you're up to these days?
I don't think so. We gave the name of the business. And like you mentioned, I even just recently joined TikTok. That's how.
Oh my goodness.
Which for me is like, what is TikTok? And I'm doing these crazy 30-second things where I'm pointing, and I actually have a younger person helping me with that because I know that's not my skill set.
Yeah.
So I actually am easier to find than I want to believe I am.
Well, good for you. Well, so folks, look for Shari on TikTok. That's great. Well, Shari, thank you so much for being here today. Your story is definitely remarkable, and it is definitely your life is definitely an imperfectly perfect life. Your mess is intriguing, and I know that you're adding tremendous value out there for a lot of women in midlife, and I'm guessing way beyond that. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It was so great talking to you today.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Shari Leid. It was so interesting to speak with her and learn about her personal and professional journey. What is your key takeaway from our interview? If you are interested in any of the resources mentioned in today's podcast, you can find them in the show notes on my website at tammygulerloeb.com/podcast. Just look for episode 171. Are you anticipating your next professional move? Check out my new book, Work from the Inside Out, Break Through 9 Common Obstacles and Design a Career That Fulfills You. It's available in print and ebook editions through my website, Amazon Worldwide, Barnes & Noble, independent bookstores, or request it through your local public library. If you were inspired by this episode with Shari, please share it with your friends and colleagues. And please do subscribe so you don't miss next week's show. Subscribing is always free. Are you enjoying the podcast? Oh, I would so love it to read your review on Apple Podcasts. It's easy to find. Go to my website, tammygulerloeb.com/podcast, click on the Apple Podcast button, and follow the instructions provided there. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, it is never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. I would love to hear from you. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.